Hey everybody, Joshua again. I want to talk to you a little bit about my favorite part of tracking, which is telling stories. So a lot of what I do, we're collecting DNA, we're finding out how many individuals we have, how they're related, whether they're a part of a family group or all of that. And making those discoveries is really, really exciting for me. And it's part of one of the things that I love the most, which is being out in the field, looking at the tracks and putting together a story, a narrative from what's taking place with those tracks. So we're going to show you a few images and we're going to talk about what's going on with those tracks in the field. So the first one I want to talk about is this track here, which if you look at it, it's framed by a measuring stick, so you can look at the size of it and you can think about some of those things I've talked to you about in terms of what is present in this track. What can you see in terms of the negative space, the toes, the claws, the heel pad, the size of this track, the overall shape. And so if you start to look at this, you can say, okay, I can see the claws. The track is not round, it's more oval. I can draw that X that I was talking about in there to make the negative space come out. I can see that raised structure shown there in the negative space. And the heel pad is pretty small in comparison to the toes. The overall track size is maybe 3.5 inches long, so it's not a particularly large track. So if I put all these things together, I'm going to say, this is a dog of some kind, this is a canine, and it's a smaller wild canine, so probably a coyote. Is what I'm gonna look at this track and say, okay, this is probably a coyote. So we followed it for a long time. We found more and more tracks, said, yeah, definitely a coyote. This is how it's moving through the forest. It's moving like a coyote. We found scat, definitely coyote scat. And then we found this. And so you look at this picture and you probably think to yourself, what the heck is going on here? And we thought the exact same thing. We're following one coyote track, and suddenly this other track comes in to meet it. And so at this point, we're looking at this, we're trying to figure out the clues of what's taking place. And I walked out there to look at, okay, what are the feet doing? Why am I seeing this long drag line of the tail in the middle? And we start to put the story together. So coyote number one that we were following was cruising through the forests, probably hunting. Coyote number two comes up through the forests to greet coyote number one. And we see this behavior displayed. So what I'm seeing there is the rear end is lowered, the back is probably arched, so the tail is being dragged through the snow. The rear feet are not being picked up particularly well to clear the snow surface because the rear end is lowered. So think about your dogs at home. What do they do when they meet each other? They're establishing their social bonds and they're establishing their social hierarchy. So when you see a dog being submissive to another dog, they typically lower their rear end and the tail tucks between the legs or is lowered. And so you're seeing in this picture submissive behavior shown in the track record in the snow. So we followed where this track came in from coyote number two to meet coyote number one, and then saw that they ran around together and reestablished their social bonds and their social hierarchy, and then they went off together to go hunt as a team. So that's part of what I really love, is being able to interpret what's taking place in these tracks. So we're going to show you another one here too. So in this picture, we don't have anything for size reference, so I'm just going to tell you, these are larger individuals. So if you look at these tracks again, you'll see definite claw registration. I can see the toes, I can see the heel pad. The heel pad, however, seems really pushed forward in these tracks, so there's not a lot of negative space, which leads you to think, what's going on? Something's happening. So these tracks are quite large. These are some wolves that I was tracking in the Swan Valley, north of the ranch. And then we show you the next picture. And what happens is those wolves were slamming on the brakes because they were hunting as a pack and they were on thin ice, and half of them just went through the creek, or through the ice into the creek. And you can see here that there's feet sliding everywhere, wolves trying to put the brakes on, they're sliding into the creek. Half the pack cuts off to the right and up around out of the creek, and the rest of them just got really wet. So it's really exciting for me to be out in the field following these tracks and slowly piecing together parts of the mystery, building a narrative as I go. I may encounter a track and have an initial thought, oh, this is this, and I may not be sure. Or, oh, this is happening, and I may not be sure. And so I continue to follow that, gather more and more information along the way until I can say more definitively what's taking place. And then you run into sort of calamitous activities like this where the wolves all went through the ice, and you get to see kind of these more humorous aspects of nature, or animals just behaving in their own way in the natural world. And that for me is really exciting. I love learning those stories. I love seeing how the animals behave when they're just out there on their own. And I love being able to come out there later and be a witness to this, and then have enough information that I can interpret to understand what's taking place. So it's one of my favorite parts of tracking.